Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into some fascinating research on an ancient text that, honestly, is going to completely shatter a lot of our modern assumptions. We're looking at Psalm 29. Now, you might be thinking, oh, just a piece of ancient Hebrew poetry, right? Well, we aren't just going to casually read it. Wait until you see how this research actually decodes it. We are stepping right into the unseen realm worldview of the ancient Near East, and we're going to uncover a hidden layer of meaning that has literally been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years.
So here is the big question to kick us off. What if an ancient poem about the weather is actually a declaration of cosmic war? See, for centuries, people have read Psalm 29 as a really beautiful but ultimately pretty standard nature hymn. Just a nice poetic description of a massive thunderstorm rolling in from the Mediterranean Sea. But the research we're unpacking today argues that reading it that way, it entirely misses the point. It is not just about the weather. It is a high-stakes, highly calculated battle in the unseen realm. The source text for our explainer today frames it with this absolutely incredible quote. It says this psalm is theological combat conducted in the borrowed vocabulary of the adversary. I mean, that is such a powerful way to put it. The author of this ancient text didn't just sit down and write a nice song. They executed a deliberate polemic. It was a calculated attack designed to strip a rival god of his power, and they used his very own words and imagery to do it. It's essentially an ancient cosmic heist.
Section 1. The Hidden Cosmic War.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand this heist, we have to remember that ancient Israel didn't exist in a vacuum, right? They were in this constant, fierce ideological struggle with Canaanite religion, specifically the worship of Baal. Now, Baal was the Canaanite storm god. He was believed to control the rain, the thunder, the lightning, and he was the guy who supposedly conquered the chaotic sea to become king of the gods. So, to push back against Baal's worldview, the ancient author used a very clear three-part road map, and it structures the entire text. First, we have the summons, which addresses the heavenly assembly. Second, we have the manifestation, which is all about the terrifying power of the divine voice. And third, it culminates in enthronement, declaring the true cosmic king. It's a brilliant cumulative logic. Let's look at how this plays out, starting with step 1.
Section 2. The Divine Council.
So the poem opens with a direct command to the Bene Elim, or sons of God. These are the spiritual beings that make up the heavenly assembly, the absolute highest tier of the divine council. The psalmist is starting right at the top of the cosmic hierarchy, commanding these divine beings to ascribe glory to Yahweh. And you really have to notice the stark contrast here between the rival worldviews. If you read the Canaanite Baal cycle texts, their divine council is an absolute mess. It's this unstable court riven by fear and shifting loyalties, where the gods are literally cowering in terror before the chaos sea deity Yam, frantically calculating who's going to win. But the Israelite council depicted in Psalm 29, it is the polar opposite. It is completely serene. There is no panic. There's zero threat. It portrays absolute, uncontested supremacy.
And that supremacy is defined by what the source calls unidirectional obeisance. Basically, it's a one-way street. The heavenly beings are commanded to worship Yahweh, and that vector of worship is never, ever reversed. Yahweh doesn't bow to anyone else. He isn't just one peer among interchangeable equals in some chaotic pantheon. He is utterly unique. And the source argues that this grammar totally destroys the idea that early Israelite religion was just simple polytheism. Yes, it's an assembly, but with one clear, unrivaled sovereign calling the shots.
Section 3. Stealing Baal's thunder. With the council established, we move to the main event, where the ultimate cosmic theft takes place. The author basically takes the most famous attributes of the Canaanite storm god and rips them right out of their native context. Just think about how systematic this is. Everything Canaanite culture claimed Baal could do, Psalm 29 says, actually, scratch that, Yahweh does that. Baal claimed domain over rain and waters. Well, the psalm says, Yahweh's voice is over the many waters. Baal was known for his thunderous voice and his lightning weapon. The psalm says, Yahweh flashes fire from heaven. Baal supposedly rules from his northern mountain, Mount Sirion. The psalm says Yahweh's voice is so powerful it violently shakes Mount Sirion. It is a meticulous, point-by-point dismantling of the rival god's resume. And this brilliantly illustrates the biting irony of the poem. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. Now, according to Canaanite myth, Baal's grand temple was supposed to be built out of these magnificent cedar trees. The psalmist is essentially laughing and saying, that temple you want to build for your storm god? Yet the voice of the true king just shattered your building materials. It exposes the complete fragility of the rival god's entire domain. The geographical details here are just so sharp too. The text specifically names Sirion. Now that isn't just some random mountain. Sirion was the Sidonian name for Mount Hermon. It was the absolute heartland of Phoenician Baalism. By naming Sirion, the ancient author wasn't just adding some nice geographical flair. It was a highly targeted, localized attack on the very home turf of the rival cult. They are basically walking right up to the opponent's front door and claiming total dominance.
Section 4. King of the Flood. So, with the rival deity thoroughly dismantled and stripped of his glory, the text moves to its third and final phase, the enthronement. But to really grasp the magnitude of this, we have to define the firmament and the cosmic flood. You see, ancient cosmology envisioned the world being covered by a massive, solid dome. This dome separated the waters down below from the cosmic floodwaters up above. It's the exact framework we see in the Genesis creation account. So when the climax of Psalm 29 says Yahweh sits enthroned above the flood, it doesn't mean he's just, surviving a bad rainstorm. It means his throne is seated on top of this cosmic structure itself. So the crucial point is this: that dome doesn't just cover ancient Israel, it covers the entire earth. Therefore, sitting enthroned above it means absolute, universal world kingship. It means unquestioned sovereignty over all nations under that dome, and, by extension, rule over any lesser gods that might be allotted to those nations. The storm theophany wasn't just about weather control, it was a massive cosmic claim that this God is the unrivaled king of the world. Section 5. Rewriting Israelite history. This realization leads us to a massive plot twist regarding how modern historians have traditionally understood the evolution of religion. For a very long time, a popular academic theory, the developmental hypothesis, has argued that Israelite religions slowly evolved. The whole idea is that they started with simple polytheism and only much later invented the idea of universal monotheistic kingship. But the hard evidence of Psalm 29 contradicts this entirely. Psalm 29 is widely agreed by scholars across the spectrum to be one of the earliest texts in the entire canon. And yet there it is, right from the start, already asserting universal world kingship and a completely subordinate heavenly council. As the source brilliantly summarizes, if the universal kingship of Yahweh were genuinely a late development, it could not appear fully formed in the oldest layer of the tradition. The evolutionary model essentially collapses when faced with this text, along with others like the Song of the Sea in Exodus 15. I mean, the timeline just doesn't work out if you claim these big cosmic ideas were invented centuries later. Furthermore, the source points out that there are well over 100 instances of plural divine council language in late Second Temple literature like the Dead Sea Scrolls. Think about that. If the idea of a heavenly council was just a primitive, embarrassing polytheistic phase that later writers outgrew and discarded, why in the world did it survive and flourish in literature hundreds of years later? Because it was never primitive polytheism to begin with. It was a stable, consistent worldview from day one. Let's move to and see how this builds across time, because this motif definitely doesn't stop in the ancient poetry. Look at this incredible trajectory of the voice over the waters theme. It starts in Genesis, separating the cosmic waters. It moves to Exodus 15 with the conquest of the chaotic sea, Yom. It's central to Psalm 29's storm theophany. And fascinatingly, this exact same theological background carries straight into the New Testament Gospels, specifically those famous scenes where Jesus calms the storm or walks on water. The connection here is incredibly direct. To an ancient reader who was completely steeped in these texts, the act of exercising authority over the chaotic sea wasn't just a neat magic trick. The one who rebukes the wind and the waves is doing exactly what Psalm 29 ascribes to Yahweh alone. The New Testament writers are intentionally presenting these storm scenes as direct claims to the exact same cosmic authority established thousands of years earlier in this ancient poem. So we are really left to ponder this question. Is this mature theology in its original form, rather than a primitive relic awaiting correction? The source material strongly argues yes, absolutely. What we have in Psalm 29 isn't the residue of a polytheistic past. It is the earliest, most concentrated expression of a complex, highly sophisticated unseen realm worldview that remained incredibly consistent throughout all these texts. Which leaves us right here. If an ancient poem that we all just assumed was about a thunderstorm can actually rewrite our entire understanding of ancient religious history and cosmology, what other cosmic battles are hidden in the texts we think we already know? It really makes you want to go back and read everything a little bit closer, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.